Hi, good afternoon, everyone. If you're joining us from the East Coast, good morning. If you're not, great to be here with you all today. We are going to get started in a few seconds. We see some folks are trickling in. So happy to have you here and welcome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I see that we have a good group of folks that have joined already, so we are going to get started for today. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar where we'll be discussing best practices on student engagement. My name is Serena Famblay Crane, and I'm going to kick things off first today. But before we get started, I just wanted to mention a few things. One, this session is being recorded. So you will have access to it in the future, as we'll be sending you a follow-up email after today's webinar where you'll have a copy of it. At any time today, you can also feel free to use the Q&A function if you do have a question for us, and we will, if we don't get to it then, we will definitely be leaving some time at the end of our session to answer those questions. Also, a few times during our webinar today, we're going to be checking in with you using a tool named Vevox. It's a website that allows us to poll and also allows you to interact with us. And so on your screen right now, you'll see some login instructions. You can use it on your phone if you have it handy, or you can pull it up on your web browser on your computer if that's a bit easier for you. And so we are going to start today with our first Vevox poll. And so if you go to vevox.app, you enter the ID number on your screen, and then you can answer some questions for us. And since we're going to be discussing engagement today, we would love to hear from you all. How do you communicate important information to your students? This is a Vevox poll that is ranked choice, so you can choose all the methods that apply, but we ask that you choose the first method that is the one you use most frequently, and then second most used method next, and so on until you create a ranked list. So I'm already seeing some answers coming in, so thank you all. I'm seeing that email is the most frequent way you communicate important information to your students, so that makes sense. Also seeing that text message is shaping out to be the second most frequent way that you communicate students. Seeing in person and other software sort of tying right now. And I'm seeing it looks like we don't have anybody that selected mailing yet, which is a little bit interesting. I feel like we always learn something new when we do these webinars and we hear from you how you're communicating most frequently with students. So that's interesting to note as well.
I guess print media is truly dead.
I don't know how our marketing folks will feel about that, but definitely interesting to learn. Great. So thank you, everyone. Very helpful for us to just get a sense of how you're communicating with students, as it's going to be our topic for today's session. And so just like how you use Vevox now, we're going to check in with you a few more times today using Vevox. So thanks for participating. So I am the Senior Manager of Partner Success at Persistence Plus, and I'm going to be facilitating today's session with my colleague, Dr. Ross E. O'Hara, who's our Director of Behavioral Science and Education. I'm going to get started with an overview of what we're going to be covering for you today. We're going to start with a brief introduction of who we are at Persistence Plus and our success model for supporting students. And then we're going to jump into our 6 best practices for keeping students engaged. And after Ross walks us through that, we're going to be wrapping up today's webinar with a real-life example of a student communication from an attendee that we'll be reviewing and discussing how you can apply these 6 best practices to your communications that you have with students. So as a little bit about us, at different points during students' enrollment, we know that they may encounter doubts or setbacks that can impact their progress while they're enrolled. We hear from students who say they may feel like everyone else has it figured out but them. I'm sure you've heard from students feeling like they are too afraid to ask for help. Maybe they're highly anxious or they're feeling demotivated. And so since 2012, we've been working to support students through our student success model that leverages behavioral nudging as an intervention. And so the idea that the right message at the right time can motivate students to make decisions that will ultimately lead them to be successful while they're in school. And we do this by proactively connecting to students 2 to 3 times a week to develop mindsets to help them deal with these academic setbacks and external obstacles that they may be facing, to encourage them to organize their time and their responsibilities, engage with their peer network, and tap into campus resources for help, all while they're making progress towards their short and long-term goals. And so we have a team of social psychologists, Ross is one of them, who craft our interventions and deliver them into messages. And these messages are rooted in peer-reviewed research, and they're delivered as text messages to students' phones, which we hear from our partners and our students is very helpful because they don't have to download a specific app or learn how to use a new program to receive this valuable information. And the platform that we use to send these text messages to students, it's scalable and intelligent in the sense that it facilitates conversations with students in real time. So students are responding to our messages and getting responses back in real time. And we can then target the interventions and personalize them based off of student characteristics and how they respond to our nudges. And we actually have an example of a real life interaction between a student and our platform on the screen right here. You can see that we are having a conversation with a student who shared with us previously that they are a parent. And so we know through research and our own anecdotes working with students that student parents have specific challenges in terms of balancing their familial responsibilities and their work. And that so they often struggle with guilt around how they spend time on their courses, as well as some other factors that impact, how much time they can actually spend with their family. And so what you're seeing on your screen is an exercise that we use to combat some of that guilt by asking students to reflect on how their college degree will benefit their children. And so since we learned that this is an exercise that really resonates with the student, our platform is then going to follow up with them throughout the academic year to learn more about their experience as a student parent. And we've refined our support over the years by working with a variety of partners. We have a sampling of our partners on your screen right now. We've worked with four-year colleges like Ohio University, Bennett College, Ithaca College, had the opportunity to work with college systems like CUNY, a community college is like our longtime partner, Lorain County, Mesa Community College as well. We've partnered with foundations and nonprofit leaders like Jobs for the Future and the College Success Foundation, along with employers in the federal government. And so what all of this has allowed us to do is to expand our knowledge on how best to support students across multiple subpopulations, from high school through college graduation, as well as supporting their transition into the workforce. And as we've supported tens of thousands of students this past decade, we've been able to evaluate our impact on their success through over 10 gold standard RCTs. And through these experiments, we've found that persistence plus support does work to help students persist and complete their credentials. We've had the chance to publish papers in several peer-reviewed journals like AERA, and most recently the Journal of Post-Secondary Student Success. And some highlights that we found over these RCTs is that the support that students are receiving over their phone from us have led to a reduction in ethnic and racial equity gaps, as well as a 7 percentage point increase in re-enrollment rates for community college students. And so that was a brief overview of who we are and how we support students through this model. I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Ross, who's going to walk us through the best practices for student engagement.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Very excited to share with you today's content. To summarize what Serena just shared with you, we've been at this for a while, almost 10 years, and we have a lot of experience, and we've learned a lot of things about how to get students to engage with communications, show up to events, take on new practices or behaviors. And we want to share some of that with you today. So before I dive into that, I do want to turn your attention back to Vivox and ask you another question. If your phone got logged out, the code is going to be back on screen in just a second. My question for you is, what's one event, task, or behavior for which you want to increase student engagement? So what's one thing on your mind where you know either right now or in the near future, you're going to be using your email, your text messaging, your other software, the stuff we just asked you about before, to try to get students to engage in some type of behavior? I see people. Registration, clearly it's early October. That's coming up for a lot of people. Enrollment, early registration, okay. Meeting with success coaches. I love promoting belongingness. That's a good one. Still see lots of registration. Internships, more registration. Just generally asking for help when they need it. Obviously, that is a huge topic. We do a whole professional development series really geared around how do you get students to just show up and ask for help with all the things they need help with. Going to the tutoring center, awesome. Admissions, going to some training sessions. Yeah, so this is exactly it. There's so many kind of events, tasks, behaviors we want students to engage in because we know it's going to lead to their success. And we help our partners do that through the technology that Serena was just sharing with you, which is, as we mentioned, entirely through text message. But a lot of these best practices that we're going to share are very applicable, whether you're talking about text or email or even in-person talking. Like, it's all ways to motivate student behavior. So thank you for answering that. Let me switch back to our PowerPoint and show you our 6 best practices for student engagement. I'm going to be going through all 6 of these, with some more detail, but they are to lead with caring, don't bury the lead, be personal, inspire a conversation, learn about your students, and uncover hidden challenges. And I hope that as you're thinking about different ways to communicate with your students, that all of these you'll find a place to use in order to increase the engagement that you're looking for. So our first lesson we always talk about is to lead with caring. So many times in the ways that we all communicate with students, we have so much information we need them to know. There are so many events and deadlines and other things going on that sometimes the number one message can be lost. And that message is that we care about you, we care about how you are as a student, we care about how you are as a person. Certainly, our messaging has always tried to put this in the forefront. When COVID hit, and it was evident in mere days how stressed out all the students on our platform were, we really kind of doubled down on this, and that has really become even deeper in our messaging philosophy since the spring of 2020. But of course, there are things happening all the time in the world that affect students on both a micro and a macro level. And this is actually a message we sent out this week, just trying to provide some caring and support for students who were shaken by the events going on in Gaza over the weekend and continuing to go on now. And so this is a message we sent, and many students actually wrote back to this. This is just one example of someone who's like, counseling, yes, where do I go? And we're able to share the counseling center information, and they said thank you. And it's these types of messages that not necessarily are informational or sort of nudging people in any sort of way, just really build this great foundation for students that the messages I'm getting from my school or my counselor or whoever it is really care about me. And it's just going to make them more attuned to all the different types of messages when it is time to say, hey, it's time to register or go look for an internship. And so this is just one of the ways in which, these caring types of messages really help, is anytime we're trying to connect students to a resource that is in some way stigmatized, attached to embarrassment, shame, an attack on their own self-reliance. So that can be tutoring, that can be emergency aid, or in this example here, a food pantry. So this was a message we sent in particular to students at one of our partner community colleges in Ohio. where we did a little study where we tracked it. We sent these caring messages about using the food pantry. And over the next month, there was this 51% increase in them seeing new families coming to the food pantry compared to the month before. And it's really, everything starts from that place of caring, of knowing, well, the school, the people sending these messages really do care about me. And if they're going to tell me about this food pantry, maybe it's something I should check out. So after that foundation of caring has been laid, my next most important point is don't bury the lead. I think every single person who answered in the VVOC said they use email, and people come to me all the time of like, why don't students open their emails? Why don't they read their emails? And a lot of times because your emails are long and complicated and not always super relevant. Text messaging obviously tends to lend itself toward briefer communication, but you can write a long text message that commits all the same sins that emails do. And the big thing is just getting the information that you need students to know or what you want them to do upfront as soon as possible. This relates to Todd Rogers and Jessica Lasky-Fink just came out with a new book called Writing for Busy Readers, which talks a lot about how much more effective our communications are, no matter the medium, when they are just very short and to the point and lack extraneous explanation. So here are a bunch of examples where we sort of try to hit students with a very clear piece of information, like the Career Center is in Shelby Hall, and then prompt them to do something. Will you reach out to set up an appointment? Set new sessions for school start May 25th. Do you need help getting registered? Here's a study about how doing expressive writing for an exam can improve your exam performance. Do you want to try it? Short, to the point, really letting students know, like, here's what you need to know and here's what we want you to do. And oftentimes when we're talking about don't bury the lead in many cases should be an ask. It's not enough just to give people information that implies like you should go to the tutoring center or you should register as soon as the registration period opens. You need to say it. And so here's an example of a study that I think this really comes across clearly. This was a group of social psychologists led by Robert Cialdini, worked with the Petrified Forest, the National Park Service running the Petrified Forest over 20 years ago, because they had these signs up all over the forest that said, your heritage is being vandalized every day by theft losses of petrified wood of 14 tons a year, mostly a small piece at a time. The only information given there is that tons of wood gets stolen, probably by a lot of people, and probably nobody gets caught or it wouldn't be a problem. Never does it say, actually tell you what to do. It implies don't steal wood, but it's not there. And so they tracked petrified wood in the forest for 2 weeks and found about 8% of it was stolen. Then they took down those signs, put up new signs that just said, please don't remove the wood from the park in order to preserve the natural state of the petrified forest. Clearly telling people what you want them to do. Don't steal. And now rates of wood theft fell to under 2%. Related to that, our third best practice we share is to be personal. So often when there's a lot of information that needs to be conveyed to students, such as with registration, that was our number one answer in the VVOCs, we see colleges send out an email that has different directions, perhaps whether you're first gen or continuing gen, or depending on if you're a transfer student, or if you're going to graduate next term or not, or depending what program you're in. And it's all in one email, and it creates this big text-based decision tree that you expect students to navigate and somehow get to the end point of, here's what you're supposed to do. And most of the time, people are just not going to read that. It's too much information to process. And as I just said, that really, really buries the lead for whomever you're trying to communicate with. So that to the degree that this is possible with your data, your technology, we always recommend being more concise and being more personalized. So if you can send registration details that just apply to first gen students, just send it to the first gen students and splice these up into different pieces. So we were able to do this in the past year with our partners at Ohio University. One of the new programs they implemented recently was this grad plan, where students at Ohio meet one-on-one with an advisor and work out this whole plan of, what are the classes you need, what are the steps you need to take to get to graduation. And this has been pretty successful. When they came to us, already over 80% of students had signed up for the grad plan, but they really wanted to figure out they wanted to push it to 100%. They wanted every student to do this. And how do we get that last 15% of that Ohio hadn't been able to reach? And so we sent some messages. And the important thing here is these messages were personalized to the context. We only messaged students who hadn't signed up for the grad plan. We didn't do a blanket text that said, if you haven't done this, then sign up for grad plan, because that's only going to get students saying, wait, I thought I did that. Did I not do that? Am I, and lots of questions. So this way, those messages are only going to who needs them. And every time we sent a follow-up, we eliminated the students who had already signed up for the grad plan. And so we were able to help Ohio push those opt-in rates from 87% to 93% in fall 2022. And they've been tracking their first year retention, and they saw a jump from 79% to 83%, which they greatly attribute to this grad plan. And so we're excited we were able to use personalized messaging to kind of get some of those most hard to reach students who, for what reason or another, had not signed up for the grad plan yet. So you have these caring messages, you're getting to the point, you're being personal. Now, I think you can really do messages that inspire a conversation. This is where a lot of our behavioral science training comes in, because our messages, go a lot further than just trying to remind students about registration or signing up for internships, but really trying to get them to reflect on their college experience and why are they here, and what is the value of what they're doing. And this is one example called a values affirmation, where we ask students about what are their most important values. This student said friendship, and tell us why friendship's important to you. And then give us another value. And they said family, and tell us why family is important. They love me no matter what and always support me. And these are the types of conversations we're able to have with students because we have that foundation of caring and support. And the reason we have conversations like this and many others that reflect on values and goals and motives is because evidence shows that they help with retention. So this values affirmation intervention, this is just one study of many that's been done on this. This was with a group that was focused on trying to increase students' retention in STEM programs, especially first-gen students. And so they recruited all the students taking intro biology at a big 4-year university. And twice during that class, they had to do a writing exercise, either this values affirmation, where they picked 2 to 3 values that are important to them and wrote about why they're important to them, just like what you saw on the last screen, or the control group picked 2 to 3 values that aren't important to them and wrote about why are these important to other people who aren't you. And then the punchline here is, for the students who did those values affirmation, there were all sorts of benefits to their STEM performance, as well as their STEM persistence, demonstrated here by, did they go on to the second class in the biology sequence? And so you see this marked increase in those first-gen students going on in biology amongst those who had done this values affirmation. We're starting to reflect on values and connect it to their education. I want to turn you back to Vivox for one final time, just to hear from all of you. I'm going to put up the final question here, which is, just using one word at a time, what values motivated you in college? What was your why for being in college? And you can say as many answers as you want, but just kind of put in one word and hit send, and put in one word and hit send. And it's going to make a cool word cloud. So I'd love to hear, what were your motivations that got you into college and got you through college? So I see career, independence, curiosity, growth, family, money and career getting big in our word cloud. Family, that's something we hear about so much from the students on our platform. I see. Oh, someone picked friendship. Love it. Achievement, stability, or financial stability. Great. And, it's these type of reflections, even briefly like this, that can be very motivating for students, whatever their values are, and just trying to help them think about how is college going to help them achieve the values that are most important to them. All right. So we've gone through 4 of our best practices. We got 2 to go, and then we're gonna so if you have any questions, start getting those in the question and answer box, because we're gonna have a moment soon to answer some of your questions, and then show you a little bit of application of this material. So our 5th best engagement practice is to learn about your students. So often when we're communicating to students, we're sending them information and reminders, and here's what you need to do. And it's all one way. It's the college, the organization, sending communications to students. And we often don't open the door to two-way communication, having that conversation that's going to allow us to learn more about our students, both in aggregate and at an individual level. So one of the things we've learned a lot about our students over the past decade is about the students who are parents and what that means to them to be a parent in college and how that motivates them. This is really important because so often colleges don't collect robust data about who the student parents are. They don't know who they are. In fact, I read this week, New America is going to be launching a pilot program with a cohort of 5 community colleges to try to come up with a better model of how you collect data on student parents and their success in community college. So that's very cool. And often the student parents, they're not advertising that they're parents on campus. And so they can sort of be this mystery population that have these unique needs and unique motives, but we don't know who they are. So this is an example. We ask people on our platform, like, do you have children? And so here's someone who said, yes, I have a daughter. And we can follow up with them to try to talk about that, because we just know for the student parents, like, supporting their children and being a role model is just so important to them. So this person talked about getting their daughter future opportunities that she didn't have a chance to have. And then this guilt issue comes up, as Serena talked about. So many of the student parents express that there's this guilt. You feel guilty when you're at school that you're not with your kids. You feel guilty when you're with your family that you're not focused on school. And it's this reciprocal challenge. And so this person felt that guilt, and we did another intervention around, like, let's just think about something that's been really positive with your kids lately, to kind of remind them, like, you're not being neglectful. Everything's good. And this was cute. She learned to say ready, set, go. And now they do races all the time. So as I said, we've learned a lot about our student parents over the last decade. We've had over 6,000 students on Persistence Plus that are parents that we know about. And again, for those students who respond to some of our questions around this guilt issue, 87% of them say they sometimes or often experience that. And I think we've seen student parents really appreciate this type of messaging. They have a 13 percentage point higher response rate to our messages than non-parents, because I think for many of them, they're excited to talk about school. They're excited to engage, especially the parents who maybe, they have little kids like this at home, and they're not great conversationalists about college-going life. So they're talking to us. And we've seen that the parents using Persistence Plus retain at a higher rate, 20 percentage points higher than the parents who don't. So this has been, I think, really important for a lot of student parents out there. And then this is data and information we can share back to our college partners, so they can be thinking about, how do we collect data on parents? How do we better support our student parents moving forward? And so finally, after you're having these conversations, you're learning about your students, you can start to uncover their hidden challenges, the things that they might not be ready to share yet because they're embarrassed, they're ashamed, they have this attitude of, like, I got to do this all on my own. We are often in this position of students sharing with us the challenges that are holding them back from success that they haven't shared with a human being yet. and we're able to help connect them to the resources on campus that are going to get them through that challenge. So this is an example. One of our messages really focus on caring. We're often just kind of checking in to say, how are things going lately? How are you doing? And this person didn't even really answer our question. They just said, I need to come in for counseling. So we can assume they're a 0 on our scale. And so we're able to respond, get them connected to a counseling appointment, and which they were able to take up. And we've had so many students write in, sharing with us mental health issues, financial health issues, academic issues that they're, sharing for the first time with this platform, with its, sort of veil of anonymity, and just the way we message students in this very caring, compassionate way to get them to open up. And then we're able to help get them to where they need to go to be able to stay in college and graduate. And so I know we went over a lot of material. Again, happy to answer questions in the Q&A box before we move on to anything else. But, those are our 6 best practices, and we hope these are going to be something helpful to you in the future as you're crafting your messages to get students more engaged.
Great. So Ross, thank you for walking us through that. We do have a few questions that have come in. So wanted to start with this question. Students have a lot of communication that's thrown at them during the school year. How do you strike a balance between over messaging and targeting student messages that are needed?
Well, thank you for that question. That's a great question. And something that comes up a lot when I talk to schools, this idea of over messaging. And first of all, I don't believe that there truly is over messaging if you're doing messaging in a very caring, personalized, helpful way. If students are getting, whether it's emails or texts or whatever, if all of those coming to them are relevant, helpful, caring, I don't think they're going to get sick of them. They're not going to be like, this is too many, because every one of them is striking a chord. So how do you make sure you're not over messaging? One, I think, is really working with your departments, your collaborators, whomever it is, to have a strategy around who you're going to message about what and how you're going to do it. There's a quick story I always remember when I was in college about, I was on Student Senate and we wanted to send one email to the whole student body to say, please come vote tomorrow in the Senate elections. And the dean of students said, absolutely not. Sending a message to the entire student body is this very privileged thing, and it takes a lot of approval to get there. And I said, but what about the athletic director? She was like, what about the athletic director? And I was like, well, every time one of our sports teams wins a game, even a regular season tennis match, he emails the entire student body to tell us that. And she responded, he does what? So it just takes one person to send out a lot of messages that are going to lead students to tune out to the stuff that's really important. So, work with your partners on that strategic plan and use these best practices so that way every message students are getting is just something that's going to really, they're going to see as helpful and caring.
Great. That sort of leads into another question that we have. We are a small team. If you had to prioritize one practice over another, how would you recommend getting started with all of this?
Yes, another great question. I sort of kind of present these in my own personal order of importance. And so really that caring piece and making sure that you're trying to reflect that in every message, because I know you all care about your students and whoever it is you're serving, but they don't always know that. And we get that in some of our messages back saying oh, the school doesn't care about me. My advisor doesn't care how I do. And I know that's not true, but clearly they're not getting that message across. So just trying to think about how do you always express that caring for how they're doing and not get so focused on, oh my gosh, they need this information and they need to engage in these 5 steps by this date. And if they don't do that, like it's going to be a disaster for them or disaster for me. And then, again, the not burying the lead, I think, is another easy one. It's just about like, what is the most important thing you have to get across to students in this moment? Can you be as concise as possible about it? And if you feel like you have 5 things you need to get across to students, like you need to prioritize and cut it down, and find some way to like parse that out. So those are my top 2.
Great, thank you. I did have a question that came in. I could probably answer this one. So for programs that serve students at multiple colleges, how specific are your referral texts? If the student needs to talk to financial aid, can your platform direct them to the financial aid office at their specific campus? That's a great question. I would say that the answer varies by partner. Right now, we have a partner, Mesa Community College in the Phoenix area. They have 2 campuses. And so they let us know before we got started with them that their campus allows for students to take multiple classes. So they could be taking a campus or a class at their Dobson campus. They could be taking a class at their Red Mountain campus. And so when we were working with them to figure out what the support would look like, they wanted students to, whenever we were referring them back to campus resources, let them know that they could go to either campus to get the service that they need. We have worked with partners in the past where there are several campuses where students are more so relegated to a specific campus that they're attending. And so in those scenarios, we do work with our partners to understand what resources are available at that specific campus, which campus is that student enrolled at, and our platform can then make sure that students are getting campus-specific information.
And I'll add, it's funny, Serena, you read that question a little bit different way than I read it, because we also work with like nonprofit organizations, college access organizations that work with students who then are dispersed amongst many different institutions.
Right.
One example right now, we're working with Parent Pathways, which is an organization in northeastern Pennsylvania supporting parents getting back into and succeeding in college. So right now we're supporting student parents that are at 2 community colleges and 1 4-year university, Misericordia. And so just wanted to kind of put that framing out there that Serena's answer is what she gave is pretty much now the answer I'm going to give is like, yes, we're able, to set that up to have like your example, Josh, and your question of like financial aid at different specific campuses. And we just kind of work with each partner about like, how are we going to, understand the resources of each campus and be able to personalize it when we're not working with the schools themselves, we're working with you, this kind of other third-party entity.
Mm-hmm. Another question for you, Ross, is can you talk more about normalizing students feeling comfortable asking for help? The resources are there, but students just don't come in to use it.
Sure. Yeah. I think in some ways in college today, this is like the big question. Like you have all built it and they do not come. And yeah, so as I mentioned before, Persistence Plus, we do this professional development series. We've done it for, college advisors, college faculty, college administrators, where we share kind of the behavioral science behind student engagement or student help seeking, however you want to think about it. And that getting a student to ask for help is it's actually a very complicated psychological process, and it can be thwarted at many different steps along the way, but there are also many different opportunities along the way to help students get comfortable. So, we always kind of start in a place of making sure, students are aware of help resources. So many times we work with partners and they think like, oh, students know all about the tutoring center, they just don't show up. And then we talk to students and they actually don't know where it is or kind of don't know anything really about it. Yeah, they've gotten like 15 emails about it, but they didn't read any of them. And then kind of moving through this process of like, they're aware of it, that they believe it will help them, both because they think it is a valuable resource and they think they themselves are capable of being helped, that we help kind of normalize it so there's no stigma attached to it. And then once they've made this decision, or what you call behavioral intent, to go use the resource, they still have to like make an appointment and plan their time and actually show up. And that's like a whole nother psychological process of goal setting and implementation. And so this is kind of like a whole thing we walk our partners through who do our professional development series. So if you're interested in that, we'll be reaching out to you and get connected with us, and we can talk more.
So Ross, I think we have time for one more question before we move on to our final activity today. So this question came in of, what do you do when a student is not responsive to your messages and repeatedly doesn't answer?
So I'll answer this in two ways. One is like, what do we do? So one of the things that's really nice about Persistence Plus and some of those RCTs Serena talked about earlier, we've demonstrated this, is that the students who are receiving the message still gain some benefit. Like, it's great if they engage with us and talk back and forth. And that usually has more of a benefit in terms of retention. But as long as they don't quit out of the messages, say like stop, unsubscribe, leave me alone, that sort of thing, like they're getting some benefit because they don't bury the lead, they're concise. Like, text message comes in, they can look, they get the information really quickly from a glance. And we've talked to students who say like, yeah, it does motivate my behavior. It does remind me like, oh, I got to focus on school right now. But no, I'm never going to respond to a text message. I've had students tell me like, I don't respond to my mom. Why would I respond to you? But they're still getting the information. Now to turn that question around and be like, what should you do? I think it's just about like, my first advice would be mixing up strategies, whether that's, if you have been, perhaps you've heard something today where, oh, I have been just sending messages that are just like reams of information. Maybe doing something that's more concise and to the point and formatted will just engage that student differently, or just some type of message that is out of the blue. Like when we sent our message during our first message during COVID, that was just like, we hope you're okay. We know you're stressed. Like, we hope you're doing okay. We got tons of responses. It didn't even ask a question, but it was just kind of so different from all the other communications they were getting that resonated. Or it can be about changing your medium. We have worked with a lot of partners who have like college advising models, and they're calling students and Zooming with students. And there's always a group of students who don't want to participate in that way. But a huge chunk of them who like won't talk to their coach, talk to us, because texting with this platform works for them. There are other students who maybe they're not as interested in texting with the platform, but they do show up. Like, students engage in different ways. And so the more kind of different opportunities you give them, the more likely you're going to kind of find what their niche is.
Great. Well, thank you all for your questions that have come in. Before we wrap up today's webinar, we want to show you how you can put some of these practices that Ross walked us through, and then even, some of what we shared in our questions, how you can put these practices into action. And so we reached out to some attendees who signed up early for our webinar and asked them to send in a text message or an email that they'd be interested in receiving feedback on live during today's session. So thank you to everyone who sent those in. We did pick one that we wanted to review with you all today. So this is a message from an organization that had a recruiting event for phlebotomy students. And so this organization took the time over a few months to advertise this event to students in classroom settings. They had phone calls, they sent emails to students, and they also relied heavily on word of mouth with telling students about this event as well. And so what you're seeing right now on your screen is the message that they sent to students the morning of the event, saying, today's the day, phlebotomy grads, please join us at 1 p.m. For our phlebotomy recruiting event. AnyLab, Test Now, BioBridge Global, Christus Health, CSL Plasma, and UT Health will all be there with students about their urgent hire to speak with students about their urgent hiring needs. Interviews happening on site. Come early to print copies of your resume. Hope to see you there. And so, Ross, I wanted to hear from you. When you look at this message, what do you initially observe that you think was done well in this message, or may line up with one of the best practices that you walked us through?
Certainly, and thank you to the brave soul who's sent this in, and now hope you'll get some valuable feedback by being the one who raised their hand as a volunteer. So I hope all of you as well can be thinking a little bit about, like, what do you see here that you think was done well? So the first thing I notice is that I'm making the assumption here that this was personalized, like that this message was being sent to phlebotomy grads or other students who reasonably would be interested in a phlebotomy recruiting event. Obviously, that is very targeted, and I would hope that this was not being sent as some blanket message to all students, including non-phlebotomists. I also want to say I love phlebotomy. My sister-in-law started her career as a phlebotomist. And so when I saw this one, I was like, yay, phlebotomy recruiting. So personalizing this message, just send it to the students who need it. And then the second thing I notice is that I feel like right to the point. Please join us 1 p.m. for this recruiting event. I mean, it's the second sentence. So the lead not buried there, and it is sort of a direct ask, like the please join us. It's not just saying there's a thing going on, which I know sounds like, of course, if you're sending a message like there's an event at 1, you mean please join us, but it's always good to be explicit about what is the actual thing you're asking them to do.
Great. And when you're looking at this message, are there any parts that stand out to you as, maybe it could be reworded a little bit better, could be revised in some way to illustrate some of these best practices that we've been discussing?
Sure. So the first thing that I noticed, and I'll admit, we had a little debate about this during our practice webinar yesterday, but I'm going with, my professional opinion. This information in the middle for sort of this day of, please come to our event text message, I think just makes the message too long and is distracting information at that point. Like, as for this day of reminder that you want to be sort of laser focused on what is the absolute bare minimum information students need and what is the ask. And so I would take all that out. I would also mention, just in the way it is phrased, it's talking about what these employers are going to do, what their goals are. They want to talk about their urgent hiring needs. At the very least, sort of frame it in the student's mindset of something like, they're here to interview you. How is this going to benefit you? Because hearing like they want to talk to me about their hiring needs, again, the meaning's a little obscured there. Second thing I notice is that there's sort of a double ask here. Please join us at 1, but then also come early to print copies of your resume. So now you've asked 2 things, which could sort of obscure the lead, like what's really going on here, and create some ambiguity. Like, my first thought was, if I got this message, I'd be like, so does early mean before 1 o'clock, or does early mean after 1 o'clock, but maybe in the first like 15 minutes or so, so I can do printing and then talk to all of these employers. So, again, I mentioned before, sometimes there's like lots of information, lots of things we need students to do, and sometimes we just need to prioritize this. And again, I would say this is like the day of reminder, be short and to the point. And then the last thing, I think, depending on how this was being sent out, there might have been an opportunity here to inspire a conversation, or at least end this in some sort of prompt. So often, I think you saw this in some of our examples earlier, when we're trying to motivate students to engage with a resource or go to an event, we'll end with some sort of a question. It might be kind of a public commitment, like, will we see you there? And actually sort of prompt them to say yes or no or maybe. Or maybe talk about asking them like, what's their plan for getting there? Do you have a plan for how you're going to get to this event? Or maybe it's just, do you have any questions? And then try to see what's going on. I know from hearing from this organization, the attendance was not what they had hoped, and maybe they would have had a lot of students writing back being like, I would come, but here's this problem, and maybe those were going to be problems that they couldn't fix, but at least they would know like, these are the barriers, so the next time we do this, here's how we can try to get our attendance up, and you've really learned something there.
Great. And I think this also can go back to the question asked about, if you had to prioritize or pick one practice, like what would you do? So Ross, you gave a few options here to sort of highlight, like if you're thinking about communicating about an event, here's one or two strategies that, you can apply as you're thinking through your next communication to students.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we want to thank you all for joining our webinar today. As Ross said, thank you to our participant who sent that communication in for us to review. We're going to be sending you an email that includes a recording of this webinar so you could reference it in the future. And included in that email will also be a survey. We'd love to hear from you and just learn more about your experience. It'll take about 3 to 5 minutes to complete. So we just ask if you could fill that out for us, help us out. That'd be really great. Ross and I are going to hang out here for a few minutes. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to let us know. But thank you all for joining us. If you want to reach out and ask us questions over email, our email address is included on the screen as well. But we hope you have a great rest of the day and hope that we'll hear from you at some point in the future, or you'll be able to attend a future webinar that we host.